And welcome to Disability Sector The Truth, presented by BFG Podcast. I am your host, Blake Forbes, along with my friend from the Paul the Other One YouTube channel, Paul Barlow. Over the next few months, we will be looking at how the New Zealand government's restrictions have affected vulnerable people in the disabled community. And we will hear how it's truly affected them in real time as opposed to what's portrayed on the media. So join us over the next few months as we really tell you the truth about what's going on in the disability sector. Hi, welcome to the first episode of Disability Sector The Truth. I'm here today with Huhana Hickey, a fellow disability advocate. So welcome to the show, Huhana. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Thank you, and it's really good to be here, Blake.
First of all, how have the minister's cuts first announced in March affected you or people that you know?
Well, me personally, not a lot. I'm on IF funding, not EGL funding. Other than the travel one, which is a bit of a concern. I have grandchildren in Australia. I travel around the Mutu doing advocacy and support for people. So that hit us really hard. I negotiated around work and being able to continue to have supports going when I'm traveling away from home. And I got that. But other than that, we've just stuck to the basics. And but with others, some have lost entire contracts. Some have had to severely limit their contracts. And for certain non-traditional disabilities like autism, etc., that are fairly new to our sector for funding, have lost carer supports, have lost the ability to have respite for their family members, all that sort of stuff. So for some families, they've lost everything and handed their budgets back. Some of us have had their cuts, but we've managed to maintain. But how people are coping, they're not. That's the reality.
And how do you feel about the, and we'll talk about this more later on, but initially that people seem to be afraid to come forward and be on programs like this?
Well, it's not new. We've got a history of bullying of disabled. You're talking about over 100 years, where once we were removed from families, thrown into institutions, either murdered, tortured, abused, and killed in the end, to the point that we now live in our homes. But the difficulty that they've got is how do we, what are we going to do? I think is the reality. What can we do? We have been bullied and abused for a long time, and it's left people afraid. The bravest people I know, one was Robert Martin, another was a woman called Alison, and she fought against the state. And this is a woman who was deemed incapable, intellectually disabled because of a virus she got as a child. She was raped, she was abused, forced to work unpaid. That woman took them to court and she won her case, got a settlement, and is now in her own home in the community. But that was bravery. Most of the community are too afraid because they're terrified of being bullied, being threatened. Some have lost services over the years, so they don't speak out. But my wedal or my challenge to them is if we don't speak out and keep not speaking out, the bullies continue to bully. And that's what we have to stop.
Mm-hmm. And we'll come back to that a bit later. But how does it make you feel seeing the new generation like myself, not being afraid to come out and do stuff like this and invite people like you on platforms like these?
I'm excited. Do you know what? We've got a generation, my generation, most did not go to university or even stay in school. So most remain uneducated unless they acquired their disability later. But we've now got an increase of disabled going to school, going to uni. We've got lawyers, we've got doctors, we've got teachers, we've got budding politicians. I say budding because we've not been very successful at getting many of our disabled into Parliament to date. But we're going to make that change. This generation of rangatahi or young people are making a difference, and that is that they have not been bullied into silence. They've grown up with families that have empowered them, helped them through. We have that wonderful Geneva young lady who's got the I think it's called, the talking computer with her. She's vocal. She's very vocal, and she's pushing for te reo in that form because that's her first language. We have young people just not afraid to speak up and step up. And we've seen that with the cuts. We've seen them not happy. They're not quiet. They're not silent. They're saying no, no more. We've seen them fighting. They are the generation, along with, in the same way, a parallel here with our Māori rangatahi, our young people, is that they are also lawyers, teachers, politicians, and all of those top jobs and everything else. And they are speaking up. These young people are going to vote, and they're going to vote with what they know. So I have a big hope in our future generation being the voice now.
We've had sources in recent days tell us that, you know, they can't do anything because they don't have the solid evidence to back it up. Like people are getting the letters to different MPs' offices and stuff like that, but they're not coming on shows like this or presenting the photos, so they can't back it up. And different officers claim that they can't, including the ministers, that they can't do anything until they have solid evidence to back it up. And if people are too shy to speak out on public platforms, rather than just sending letters, their hands are tied. What do you say to that?
Well, there's a petition going around like, what do we think? Oh, it's a survey. What do we think? What do we need? And I'm like, you guys have had decades. That's why Enabling Good Lives was actually formed as a trial to implement what we had been telling them for decades. Then Enabling Good Lives came out 2 years ago to go nationwide, no longer a pilot, but remained underfunded. However, that system has now gone. How do I feel? The ministers need to be talking to us. I've had a strong relationship with ministers for a long time. And this time I have no relationship with either Minister Simmons or Minister Upston. And the reason for that is they haven't come back to the community. They select who they talk to. They select when they talk to us. That is not the role of the minister. We voted them. Even if we didn't vote them in, we are their constituents. Their job is to come to us. And I would invite Minister Upston, come and have a talk on this network and talk to us about what your deep thoughts are, because quite frankly, you're scaring me with your rhetoric, and I think you need to front up with us. Also, we have some very qualified disabled. We've got lawyers. We've got teachers, we've got doctors, we've got social workers, we've got people with lived experience, we've got journalists, we've got a lot of our own community who have the skills and the expertise to guide you. Instead, she chose to go to non-disabled people to write the original report, a report that has information we've known about for years. Instead of blaming Whaikaha, instead of removing them as a ministry, they honestly should have come to us, talked to us, and found a way forward, because this issue will keep coming back. Doesn't matter who's in government, it will keep coming back until we find a funding model that we can sustain our budgets with.
What is your response to Prime Minister Luxon and Minister Upton keep blaming Labour a year into their reign? They keep pushing this rhetoric of, as we say on our platforms, blame Labour, blame Labour, blame Labour all the time.
Well, the issue around disability isn't about one party anyway. It's actually about all the parties, all the politicians, And what do they do for disabled? Every single one of them managed to get in euthanasia, which is a high risk. We've got a bill coming up shortly, and our favourite eugenicist sitting in Parliament is happy to extend it to disabled. And I bet you not one political party will stand against it, because they all have their issues against us. What we need is a bipartisan approach on this issue. We need them to come together and listen to us. Not one party would give us a ministry unless we pushed it. We pushed it, we got the ministry. They underfunded it from day one. They underestimated what our belief in that ministry was going to be. It was only in for 2 years. Now, it wasn't Labor's fault. Well, it was, in that they underfunded it. But when National came in, when this coalition came in, they immediately did not increase any funds. They didn't look at how to resolve the issue. They were too busy looking at how they can give tax cuts to the rich and to the landlords. They didn't bother to look at the fact that disabled desperately needed their budgets to be confirmed. We've found out now also, not just with the budget cuts, but also services providing community supports needed to also, they're having cuts. They're not being told when their contracts are going to be renewed. There's a whole lot of uncertainty out there. They need to stop the budget cuts. They needed to stop those immediately and reinstate them. Listen to us, because we've got the solutions.
Do you find it a bit rich from the current government, considering especially National were the ones who brought in Enabling Good Life, and now they're ripping apart what John Key left, or what, that era left?
Well, this is the crazy part. It was under John Key that the pilot began. It continued under Labor. They weren't going to stop it. It was costing the state a lot of money every year. And every year, NAS services had to sacrifice millions of dollars to keep this Enabling Good Lives pilot going. And so we knew then that there was a funding issue. Not one party has looked at how to fund all of this. Now, we've offered suggestions. There's economists like Ganesh Nana, who's a brilliant social economist. Bernard Hickey could have helped. They could have advised what you can do in order to fund and sustainably funded. Then there's Warren Forster's research on ACC and how to bring about an equitable system across all the disability sector. That hasn't been implemented. His report was lauded by all the parties. The other thing that was lauded by all of the parties was the Welfare Expert Advisory Group report. We've got a crisis in that, one, disabled people are seen as beneficiaries and not as an asset, but as a deficit and a burden. We need to be off the benefit rein, but we need to be on a pension rein. Different way of looking at us. Those of us on SLP, those who have got chronic illness and mental health issues on job seeker sickness, need to be under a different type of system than mainstream job seeker. That's one. Two, we need a sustainable funding model. And three, we need the experts in the disability sector, not the able-bodied, but we can look after ourselves. It's like putting a man in charge of the Ministry of Women's Affairs or, that type of thing. It's just ridiculous. Disabled know what the disabled need, and no one else really knows it to our angle. We need to be in charge of what we need to be doing to deal with our services.
What do you say to the minister's counter that it's, and there's 2 points to this question. It's one of the biggest budgets in history when they did it earlier in May, but then you got fellow economists like Craig Rennie saying it's only a drop in the bucket and it's only a small percentage of what Labor gave. So where do you sit on that argument?
I agree. It is only a tiny percentage. The problem we've got is this goes back, and this is, I'm sorry, but before your lifetime, it goes way back to when Shipley and Richardson were in Parliament and they changed the budgets, but they also did a whole lot of other things around system changing. And one of those things was when they fiddled with the benefit, they changed how it matched growth each year. But also, if you were to say GDP, if we increased our taxes by about 3%, we could fully cover health, education, welfare, and disability cuts just by that. Now, people go, oh, but we don't want more pay more taxes. Well, everybody one day at one time in their life will experience disability. Everyone. If you live longer, you will experience it. If you have an accident, that no one knows when or how it comes, but it happens. Now, the happiest country in the world is Finland, and it's happy. And what does it do? It fully funds health, welfare, education. It's closing its prisons because they have a therapeutic model. We are a social democracy, a very similar one to Finland. We could emulate a very similar model and, of course, implement our partnership model that we want to do as far as making it relevant to the global south. We would have a very successful country. But all people look at is we've got gold in them there hills, oil and under the sea. They want the money. They want the resources to make money. But who does that money go to? It goes to the offshore corporates. It does not come back to the citizens. We need to come back and get realistic, and we need a fairer tax system. We need those, overseas they have GDP. They have it in Australia. They have that capital gains tax, CGT. They have it in Aussie, they have it in America, they have it in the UK, they have it in Canada. Why then do they fight against it here when it's in place in the very countries they threaten to go and move to? It doesn't make sense. We could have a fairer tax system if the wealthy ones actually paid their fair share. It sickens me when I find out the Wright Foundation made a profit out of taxpayer money of 34 million, gave their shareholders a cut of 37 million of a total profit they made. That's what's wrong with our system. We need to rebalance our tax system to a fairer outcome.
And you would be supportive.
And stop selling off our assets, actually.
And you would be
No, sorry, that was me.
And you would be supportive of a capital gains tax or not?
Yes, absolutely. First two houses, maybe, if that's people's issues, can be completely free of it. But everything else after that, you got to pay.
And what would be your message to especially somebody like Mr. Hipkins, of the leader of the Labour Party, who's a bit hesitant to have one right now?
Stop being afraid, because that's what actually lost you your mandate, and that's what lost you the party. We were promised you were going to be reformative, and that last 3 years there was no reform going on. You were being reactive. So what I would say to you, and with great respect to Labour, who, I loved Michael Joseph Savage. I appreciated and really enjoyed the leadership of Jacinda. But what we really need to be doing is getting brave. If you want to be truly, truly representative of the majority of this country, you will get brave and call for a capital gain tax. Detail it, like how are you going to protect those that just have, a small asset of one or two homes, to those who are rorting the system massively. Tell us how you can do it, but please bring it in.
As we wind down here, how does it make you feel that Mr. Luxon is saying there's no more money for disability, but yet he's giving almost $3 million of tax to landlords and selling his own houses for, ironically, capital gains tax? What do you say to that?
He is insulting us, treating us like we're children, taking away our voice. And quite frankly, Mr. Luxon, one day you too will have a disability. You're going to hate it when you find that arthritis in your hips. It's going to mean a hip replacement. Yep, you've got insurance and you can afford it. Good on you. But the majority of us don't. And we are just as entitled as you to having rights in this country. If we are going for equal rights, as you and your cohorts keep saying, then what about our equal rights for disabled people to have the same access to surgeries and stuff? Stop killing off our health system. Stop privatising everything. Bring back our state-owned assets. Give us our rail system. Give us our health system back. Do not privatise it, because I tell you right now, there will be dissent if that happens. Stop being a CEO and start being a Prime Minister.
Does it make you sick like me that he's all these years is I'm wealthy and I'm sorted. That make me laugh. Just
Well,
wealthy and I'm sorted.
Well, us bottom feeders here, we've got our own systems, and we will look after each other. Do you know what I like about being a bottom feeder, Pohara, Māori, in South Auckland, in my community? Is our community is our community. We look after each other. If someone needs kai, we give them kai. If someone needs help in other ways, we give them that help in other ways. This CEO that runs our country, he's not going to beat us. He might bring us down. He might make life hard, but we're resilient. We got through the last homelessness crisis. We've gotten through the lockdowns. We will get through you guys, but you're making it very hard when we risk dying in our own hospitals now.
And finally, you talked about earlier about encouraging Louise Upton to come on the program. What would you say to the people across parties that have told us they don't have the time to come on the program? They don't have the time. They've got too busy a schedules, and that's just not national. That's across the board. What would you say to them?
Well, it's obvious you don't want our vote then. I know for a fact, I have spoken with certain politician heads of the different parties. I know the ones who support us, and I know the ones who are lip service. If you really care about your disabled constituents, remember there's 25% of us, 33% Māori, let's take it that way, 67% of Māori are disabled by the age of 40. If you don't come and talk to this cohort, we will be advocating for disabled voters to vote where there is a voice that is going to be our voice that represents us, for us, about us, and with us, and that we will be voting for those who talk to us, not against us. You don't care about us, don't come on the program. But if you do care, you come on this program. And Minister Upton, I really would know that I would respect you more and listen to what you've got to say if you would come onto this program and actually talk to us.
Well, thank you, Huhana, for your time today. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you, and you too.